I'm the second of three brothers. My older brother earned his Eagle Scout badge. My younger one dropped out somewhere along the way during Boy Scouts. For reasons I never fully understood, my parents never pushed me to join, which is strange because I remember sitting in the back seat, feeling genuinely envious every time my mom dragged me along to watch my brother Scott compete at Pinewood Derby events. But the thing that ate at me the most, the thing I felt I was being cheated out of, were the campouts. Those weekends where the whole troop would disappear into the woods and spend the night under the stars. I tagged along for the drop-off once or twice. I watched them pitch tents and get fires going. But being younger and not an actual member, I wasn't allowed to stay. So I'd climb back into the car and go home. My envy was mostly directed at Scott because I grew up watching him prep for these trips. Before every campout, he'd bring a tent home from the troop and practice assembling it in the backyard. Even at 7 or 8 years old, I remember exactly the moment the idea hit me. Why couldn't we just do our own version right here? The plan was simple. Set up the tent in the backyard and sleep in it overnight. To my young brain, that was basically the greatest thing imaginable. And our backyard made it even better. Our childhood home sat in a wide, open neighborhood where the properties all kind of flowed into each other. Instead of fences, yards were separated by stretches of trees and dense brush, which gave the whole area a genuinely woodsy feel. The backyard itself was massive, and we already had a fire pit out there. Our parents got into the spirit of it, lighting the pit and letting us roast marshmallows. My little brother was out there with us too. But our parents weren't about to let a 4-year-old sleep in a tent overnight. Once it got late enough, they brought him inside and told us to start winding down. At that point in my life, the Game Boy SP was the handheld. After we crawled into our sleeping bags, Scott and I pulled out our respective consoles and played for a while. I was deep into Super Mario Bros. 2, a game I was completely fixated on, but could never actually finish. Eventually, I set mine down and rolled onto my side to try to sleep. But sleep wouldn't come. I was tired, but my body wasn't cooperating. Maybe it was the sleeping bag. It wasn't exactly designed for comfort. A long stretch of time went by before I finally went under. I woke up disoriented. The kind of disoriented where your brain hasn't caught up to your surroundings yet. I looked around the dark tent and then I noticed it. Scott's sleeping bag was flat and empty. The zipper on the tent was still closed, so he must have slipped out quietly at some point and gone back inside because he couldn't sleep either. Suddenly, being alone out there felt very different. I got up, reached for the zipper, and before pulling it open, I did what any kid would do, peeked out slowly just to check. And that's when everything changed. There was a figure sitting by the fire pit in the dark. It wasn't Scott. It was a man, an adult, a stranger. And he was already facing the tent. He had to have seen me the second I opened the flap. I yanked the zipper shut and scrambled back into my sleeping bag. As if a thin layer of nylon was going to do anything. I lay completely motionless. The tent was almost entirely black inside, just a faint gray glow from the moonlight pressing through the fabric. I fought the urge to call out for my dad. I wanted it to be him, but I knew it wasn't. I'd caught a glimpse of that man, and my dad would have said something. He wouldn't have just sat there watching. Then I heard the chair by the fire pit scrape against the ground. My whole body went cold. I prayed he stayed put. But I could see a shadow forming on the side of the tent now. A solid mass blocking out the moonlight from that direction. He was right there, just on the other side of the fabric. He was right outside. My plan, if you could call it that, was to stay perfectly still. Maybe he'd think the tent was empty. Maybe he'd just leave. Then I heard the zipper, moving slowly, dragging downward just a few inches at a time. The gap at the bottom of the tent, that small section where most zippers don't fully seal. I'd never even noticed it before that night. An eye appeared in that gap. One eye, pressed right up against the opening, staring directly at me through the darkness. I could see the white of it, just hovering there in the black. I couldn't scream. For several long seconds, I was completely frozen, and then the eye crinkled at the corner, the way it does when someone smiles, except I couldn't see any smile. I could only see that one eye, and it was squinting with amusement. The zipper moved another inch, and then I screamed. I threw myself backward, kicking out of the sleeping bag, crashing into the tent poles. Outside, I heard feet hit the ground and take off running across the yard. The porch light burst on through the fabric of the tent. My dad came flying out the back door, shouting. By the time he reached the fire pit, whoever that man was had already disappeared into the night. My parents called the police. I ended up in their bed with my mom while officers swept the area outside. It was the kind of night you don't forget. I was shaken for a long time after. Weeks, maybe more. Then, maybe a month later, the second thing happened. The thing that cemented this as the experience I'll carry with me forever. I attended Catholic school, and we'd have a short recess on the concrete schoolyard after lunch. The far end of the yard was fenced off and faced the street. We were playing some kind of running game, tag, red light, green light, something along those lines, and I sprinted to the fence to reach the safe zone. While I was standing there with other kids around me, a voice came from the other side of the fence. A man, asking for directions to somewhere I couldn't even tell you today. I said I didn't know. We weren't supposed to speak to strangers through the fence regardless. Then he said, "Your name's Chris, right?" That sentence is branded into my memory. His tone, his face, the way my stomach dropped completely out of my body. I told him no. I lied, quickly, the way a scared kid does when every instinct says run. He smiled, and he said, "You don't remember me, do you?" I turned and ran straight for one of the recess monitors, pointing back at the fence. By the time anyone looked, he was gone. One of the other kids confirmed they'd seen him too. The monitors pulled everyone inside immediately. The school called my parents. I was certain it was him, the man from the backyard, the eye in the tent. I was taken home early. My parents were terrified. We lived in a genuinely nice, quiet area, and the idea that someone like that had been watching, had known enough to find me at my school, was a nightmare that didn't have a clean ending. Things eventually went back to normal after months of close supervision, but it never fully left me. It still tightens my chest when I think about how close it came to being something I wouldn't be here to talk about. I was 21 when I moved out of Salem, Oregon. Small town feel, quiet streets, the kind of place you don't expect anything strange to happen. I bought my first house about 50 miles out and spent the next several weeks furnishing it on a budget. Stuff from my parents, hand-me-downs from their friends, and whatever I could find on online marketplaces. I drove a Ford Raptor at the time, which made hauling furniture a lot easier than it would have been otherwise. One afternoon on Facebook Marketplace, I came across a listing that stopped my scroll. It was a digital yard sale of sorts. Someone offloading a bunch of items all at once. Two things jumped out immediately. A cream-colored sectional sofa that looked like it had never been used, and a Cannondale mountain bike. I didn't own a bike, and out where I lived, having one made perfect sense. The rest of the stuff didn't really interest me. I messaged the seller. The back and forth was quick and no nonsense. Short answers, easy negotiation, and he agreed to a slightly lower price without much pushback. He told me I could come pick everything up that evening, and since it was summer in Oregon, there'd still be light out when I arrived. Given the size of the sectional, I figured I'd need to make a couple of trips. I checked the address on the map before heading out. It was right on the coast. I pulled up satellite view to make sure it was actually a house. It was, and not just any house. A long private driveway cut off from the road and wound toward a massive open property with what looked like a substantial home. In the back, the property dropped straight off to the ocean. I remember thinking, with money like that, why are they selling a couch on Marketplace? The drive took me through increasingly upscale scenery. The closer to the shore, the bigger the properties. Eventually, I turned onto a long, tree-lined road, passing driveways that disappeared into the hillside toward what I assumed were cliffside homes. Then I turned onto the driveway for the listing. Unpaved, narrow, shaded by trees on both sides. About 10 seconds in, the trees broke open into a wide clearing. The driveway sloped upward toward a house sitting at the top of the hill. I parked next to an older sedan, a Mercury Sable type, maybe, which was oddly out of place. The house looked like it belonged to someone with serious money. The car looked like it belonged to someone who needed it. I walked up to the front door, ready to knock or ring, but there was a yellow post-it note stuck to it. Doorbell's broken, please use the back door. Odd, since knocking was obviously an option, but I followed the instruction. I sent the seller a message, letting him know I'd arrived and was heading around back. I moved along the side of the house, and as I passed each window, I noticed the blinds were all pulled shut. Every single one. I got to the backyard and stopped for a second. It was genuinely breathtaking. The property just opened up and fell away to the Pacific Ocean, stretching out to the horizon. I climbed the back deck and knocked on the sliding glass door. Its interior blind was drawn closed too. No response. I knocked again, checked my messages. Nothing. He hadn't read it. I sat down in one of the deck chairs and turned it toward the ocean view while I waited. Checked the address again. It was right. The note on the front door confirmed someone had been there. I figured maybe he was in the shower. I decided to take a short walk down to the cliffside while I waited and get a look at the view up close. It was the kind of view that makes you think about life choices. I stood there for a minute, taking it in. When I turned and started walking back up toward the house, maybe 3 steps in, I stopped dead. Every single blind in every window was now open, and there was a person standing at each one. None of them were moving. They stood completely still, arms at their sides, facing outward. I stood there for a long moment, trying to decide if I was seeing what I thought I was seeing. I took a few steps closer. Every single face was smiling. I genuinely couldn't tell if they were mannequins. That's how motionless they were. But something about the smiles, the uniformity of it, the stillness. My brain didn't want to process it. I made the decision immediately. I needed to get to my truck. I moved at a fast walk around the side of the house. The window that had been blinded on the way in. It was now open too. Someone standing there as well. Same posture. Same expression. I didn't run, but I was close to it. I got around to the front, climbed into my Raptor, and didn't look at the front windows. I didn't want confirmation. I reversed all the way down the driveway without turning around. At some point near the road, against my better judgment, I glanced ahead at the house through the windshield. The front door was open. A man was standing on the porch, hands in his pockets, watching me drive away. I pulled into the nearest neighbor's driveway and knocked. A man, I'll call him Tom, answered. I explained everything as clearly as I could and asked if he knew anything about the person who lived next door. Tom looked genuinely thrown off. He told me the neighbor, I'll call him Jim, was rarely home, and that he wasn't the type to set up something like that. Tom called Jim on the spot. The conversation went roughly like this. Tom told him there was someone at his door claiming Jim had invited him over to buy furniture, but that the house was full of people standing at the windows. A pause. Tom repeated back to Jim, "What do you mean you're not home this week?" Jim wasn't there. He'd been out of town for days. I described the man on the porch, the car in the driveway, everything I could remember. Jim asked me to take his number so he could follow up after the police came. I left, went home, and honestly didn't have the energy to sit through a full police investigation as a witness. But Jim called me that night. He asked me to send him the Facebook listing. It had been removed. The messenger profile I'd been communicating with had been wiped blank. I passed him what I could. When I followed up asking what the police found, he told me, nothing stolen. All 3 exterior doors left unlocked, the blinds drawn shut again, and no car in the driveway. Whatever those people wanted me in that backyard for, I don't know. What I do know is, I'm glad I left when I did. I live with my parents in Murrysville, Pennsylvania. They went away for a weekend, which meant I had the house to myself. Naturally, I decided to throw a small backyard party. We have an in-ground pool and a separate pool house, and the rest of the yard gives way to woods at the back. It's private, it's spacious, and for one night at least, it was perfect. I started setting up early that day. Cloudy afternoon, but the party was at night, so it didn't matter. I was hauling out folding tables for beer pong and drinks when I heard it. A cough. Not a sharp cough. A slow, deliberate throat clearing, like someone working through something stuck. Low. Male. And it came from just inside the tree line. I set the table down and went still. The wind was barely moving anything, which meant the sound carried clean. Whoever made it was close. Close enough that from that position in the trees, they would have had a clear line of sight to me. I scanned the tree line and called out, asked who was there. Nothing came back. No voice, no rustling, no footsteps. Just silence. That silence bothered me more than a response would have. If it had been some random person cutting through, I should have heard them walking away. Instead, the woods just sat there, quiet. I stood there for almost half a minute, just listening. The longer I stayed, the heavier that feeling got. That particular sensation of being watched, while something watches you stay completely still. Eventually, I picked up what I was carrying and went back inside. I didn't want to be alone out there anymore. I called my friend Mark and asked him to come early to help me finish setting up. I didn't mention the cough. No point in getting anyone's head spinning before the night even started. Mark showed up around 6, brought drinks, and we knocked out the setup together. I kept glancing toward the tree line while we worked. Nothing moved. Whatever, or whoever, had been there was either gone or staying quiet. People started arriving between 7 and 8. At the height of the night, there were around 20 of us out there. Music going, people in the pool, string lights around the patio. With that many people around, the woods stopped feeling ominous. I caught myself looking over there a few times anyway. The cough just hadn't stopped sitting right with me. By midnight, things were winding down, and By 1 in the morning, the last person had gone. I was too tired to clean up. I did a slow walk around the backyard before going in. Checked behind the pool house. Looked toward the trees one more time. Everything was still. The pool water barely rippled. Lights reflecting off the surface. Calm. I locked the sliding door, went upstairs, brushed my teeth, and got into bed. I was on my phone for about 30 minutes before I put it down, and then I lay there in the dark for another half hour, drifting. Then I heard the splash. Not a small one. Not a leaf dropping in, not a frog. This was the distinct, heavy impact of a person entering water from height, like someone jumping into the deep end. I was awake instantly, completely still. A few seconds passed, and then I heard swimming. Actual strokes through the water, rhythmic and deliberate. My first instinct was that someone from the party had stayed behind and decided to go for a late swim. Drunk maybe, thinking it was funny. But I knew everyone who'd come over. Nobody would do that without saying something. I checked my phone. 2 a.m. I got out of bed and moved to the window that overlooks the backyard. I kept the lights off. I didn't want whoever was out there to see me first. I looked down at the pool. There was a man swimming from one end to the other. Calm, steady laps, like it was his own pool. I tried to recognize him. I knew 20 or so people who'd been there that night. This wasn't any of them. I leaned closer to the glass. The pool lights lit his face well enough for me to be certain. I had never seen that man before in my life. I yelled out the window at him. The swimming stopped immediately. He looked up toward the window slowly. And the thing that hit me hardest in that moment, he didn't look startled. He didn't look confused or caught off guard. He just looked up at me, calm, like he'd been expecting it. He moved to the shallow end and climbed out. I could see how tall he was the moment he was standing fully. He stood there dripping for maybe 2 seconds, looking toward the house. I expected him to run. He didn't. He started walking toward the sliding door, not jogging, not hesitating, walking with a kind of direct, purposeful pace. Like he already knew the layout. I yelled again, no response, and then I heard the sliding door open downstairs. I know I locked it. I'm certain I locked it. But I heard it slide open and then slide shut. I ran to my bedroom door and locked it. My hands were visibly shaking. I texted Mark asking if anyone had stayed behind before he left. Didn't wait for a reply. I dialed 911 immediately, kept my voice low, gave my address, told them there was an intruder inside the house. Then I heard the footsteps. Wet. Slow. The slight tacky sound of bare feet lifting off hardwood. He wasn't moving fast. He wasn't searching. He was walking in a straight line toward the stairs. The stairs creaked one at a time. He reached the top. The hallway floorboard outside my room gave under his weight. He stopped right outside my door. Water dripped onto the floor. The handle turned. Once. Twice. A third time. Harder. When it didn't open, there was a long pause. The 911 operator was saying something in my ear. I couldn't track it. I set the phone face up on the bed. Then he knocked. 3 times. Slow and even. I picked the phone back up, put it on speaker, and said loudly that I was on the phone with police and they were on their way. Another pause. Then, through the door, in a low, composed voice, a man said, "It's me." Open the door. The voice was calm. Adult. Mid-30s, maybe. Not panicked, not aggressive. Matter of fact, I told him I didn't know who he was. I told him to leave. Silence. 5 seconds. Maybe more. Then I heard him turn. Wet footsteps moved back down the hall, back down the stairs. A moment later, the front door swung open and slammed. I didn't move until the police arrived and knocked. When I finally came downstairs with them, there was a trail of water on the floor. From the back door, up the staircase, all the way to my bedroom door. They searched every room. He was gone, and outside of that water trail, there was nothing left behind. I texted everyone who had come that night, asking if they'd seen anyone stay back. The ones still awake said no. The rest answered in the morning. Same answer. Nobody knew him. The cough I heard in the woods earlier that afternoon, I have no doubt in my mind that was him. Whether he slipped inside during the party when people were constantly going in and out, I can't say for sure. As for what he wanted, I genuinely don't know. What I do know is that I woke up when I did, and I didn't open that door. And I think about what might have happened if either of those things had gone differently.